Welcome to our channel. Today we're diving into the history of military blunders with the worst armies in the world that have embarrassed themselves. Because, let's be honest, nothing spices up a dusty history book like a good old-fashioned military screw-up. And trust me, we've got some real doozies lined up for you. We'll be looking at armies throughout history that, well, let's just say they didn't exactly cover themselves in glory. From battles fought against the wrong enemy, yes, you read that right, to tactical masterclasses in what not to do. These military misadventures will have you wondering how some of these folks even managed to find their boots in the morning, let alone lead armies. So, buckle up history buffs and disaster enthusiasts as we journey through some of the most spectacular military blunders ever recorded. Stay tuned to find out which armies made the list and why. The year 1788, the Austrian Army accidentally attacks itself. They amassed a massive army of over 100,000 men and marched them right into the heart of present-day Romania. As the vanguard of the Austrian army reached the town of Caransebeș, they stumbled upon a group of their own cavalry selling schnapps. A disagreement broke out over the schnapps, which escalated quickly. Soon, shots were fired, but not at the Ottomans. The rest of the Austrian army, hearing the commotion, assumed the Ottomans were attacking. Panic spread, and the entire Austrian army was firing blindly into the night. By the time the sun rose, the battlefield was littered with thousands of Austrian casualties, all thanks to a case of mistaken identity and a bit too much schnapps. The year is 1741. Britain decides to launch a daring raid on Cartagena de Indias. They cobbled together a massive fleet, boasting over 180 ships and 27,000 men. What could possibly go wrong? Disease. The Caribbean was a breeding ground for tropical diseases, and yellow fever took a liking to those British soldiers. As the British fleet approached Cartagena, disease began to rip through their ranks. Weakened by disease and facing stubborn Spanish resistance, the British launched a series of ill-advised attacks. Their attempts to dig tunnels under the city walls were met with explosive results. After 2 months of incompetence, the British admitted defeat, having lost thousands of men, mostly to disease. The Spanish were left to pick up the pieces and probably invest in a stronger mosquito net industry. Let's rewind to the year 1302, in what is now Belgium. Here we meet the French knights, the medieval equivalent of professional athletes. Across the battlefield stood their opponents, the Flemish militia. The battle took place near the town of Kortrijk, and the French knights charged headfirst into the Flemish lines. But the Flemish stood their ground. Armed with pikes and a burning desire to not be ruled by the French, they repelled wave after wave of French attacks. The French cavalry found themselves bogged down in the mud. The Flemish used their pikes to unhorse the knights, turning the battlefield into a chaotic mess. By the end of the day, the battlefield was littered with the corpses of French knights, and the Flemish had collected enough golden spurs to start a rather morbid jewelry collection. The year is 1896. Italy sets its sights on Ethiopia. The Italians, with their modern weaponry and dreams of empire, underestimated their opponents. They believed the Ethiopians to be backward and disorganized. The two armies clashed at Adwa, and it was clear this wasn't going to be the walk in the park the Italians had anticipated. The Ethiopians, fighting on their home turf, knew the terrain like the back of their hands. They ambushed Italian columns, disrupted their supply lines, and generally made life miserable for the invaders. The Ethiopian army, armed with a mix of modern rifles and traditional weapons, fought with a ferocity that took the Italians by surprise. By the end of the battle, the Italian army was in full retreat, leaving behind thousands of casualties. The Battle of Adwa was a stunning victory for Ethiopia and a humiliating defeat for Italy. It's 1905 and the seas are about to be stained with the ineptitude of the Russian Navy. After a series of embarrassing defeats in the Russo-Japanese War, the Russian fleet set sail from the Baltic Sea for a rendezvous with disaster in the Tsushima Strait. This was the Russian Baltic Fleet, the pride of the Tsar, fresh off a 7-month cruise around the world. On the other side were the Japanese, led by Admiral Togo Heihachiro. Unlike their Russian counterparts, the Japanese were prepared, well-trained, and eager to deliver a swift blow. As the Russian fleet lumbered into the strait, they were met with a lean, mean fighting machine of a Japanese fleet. The Japanese, using their superior speed and tactics, outmaneuvered the Russians at every turn. The few Russian ships that survived the onslaught were either captured or scuttled by their own crews. The Battle of Tsushima was a national humiliation for Russia, a stark demonstration of their technological and tactical inferiority. It's 1879 and the British Empire is starting to look shaky in the hills of Zululand. The British, confident in their superior firepower, decided to add Zululand to their collection of colonies. The Zulus, under King Cetshwayo Kampande, were fierce warriors, skilled in hand-to-hand combat. At the Battle of Isandlwana, the British set up camp in a tactically questionable location. The Zulus, using their knowledge of the terrain, surrounded the British camp. They unleashed a wave of warriors that crashed against the British lines with irresistible force. The British, caught off guard, found their rifles were no match for the sheer number of Zulu warriors. The Battle of Isandlwana sent shockwaves through the British Empire. The Zulus had delivered a blow against colonialism that resonated far beyond the hills of Zululand. Hold on to your 10-gallon hats, folks, because we're heading to the Wild West, specifically to the year 1876. Enter George Armstrong Custer, a Civil War hero with a penchant for flamboyant gestures. Custer, leading a contingent of the 7th Cavalry, is tasked with rounding up the Lakota Sioux and Cheyenne tribes. Custer, blessed with an abundance of bravado, vastly underestimated the size and strength of the Native American forces. He divided his forces, sending a small detachment into the heart of a very large and very angry hornet's nest. The Native American forces, led by Sitting Bull and Crazy Horse, were a formidable force. As Custer and his men rode into the valley of Little Bighorn, they were met with thousands of Native American warriors. The battle was over before it began. Custer and his men were wiped out. The Battle of Little Bighorn became a symbol of Native American resistance. It also cemented Custer's place in history as a cautionary tale in arrogance and tactical blundering. Bundle up, comrades, because we're heading to the Winter War of 1939 to 1940. The Soviet Union decided to add a little Finnish real estate to their collection. The Finns, however, had other plans. What they lacked in numbers, they made up for in sheer grit and determination. The Soviets, used to overwhelming their enemies, vastly underestimated the Finns. The Finns, using their knowledge of the terrain, their white camouflage suits and their trusty skis, became masters of guerrilla warfare. The Winter War became a testament to Finnish resilience, and a reminder that even the mightiest armies can be brought low by arrogance and poor planning. The Finns, though ultimately forced to cede territory, earned the respect of the world for their courageous stand. Bonjour, mes amis, and welcome to the jungles of Vietnam, 1954. The French, still clinging to their colonial empire, are locked in a struggle with the Viet Minh, led by General Vo Nguyen Giap. The French decided to lure the Viet Minh into a decisive battle at Dien Bien Phu. The Viet Minh, however, had other ideas. They surrounded the French base and dragged artillery pieces over mountains and through jungles. The French, stuck in their fortress, looked up at the surrounding hills with dread. The Viet Minh unleashed a relentless artillery barrage on the French positions. After 57 days of brutal fighting, the French garrison surrendered, marking the end of French colonial rule in Indochina. The Battle of Dien Bien Phu was a turning point in the Vietnam War, and a reminder that even the most well-equipped armies can be defeated by a determined enemy. Hola, amigos, and welcome to the sunny shores of Cuba, 1961. The United States, eager to topple Fidel Castro's regime, is about to embark on a plan so ill-conceived that it would make Wile E. Coyote blush. The plan was to train and equip a force of Cuban exiles, land them on the beaches of Cuba, and spark a popular uprising. The CIA grossly overestimated the Cuban people's willingness to rise up against Castro. The invasion, launched from the Bay of Pigs, was a disaster from the start. The air support promised by the U.S. never materialized, leaving the exiles stranded on the beach. Within 72 hours the invasion was over, with the surviving exiles either captured or fleeing back to the United States. The Bay of Pigs invasion was an unmitigated disaster for the United States and a propaganda coup for Castro. Well, there you have it, 10 of the worst military blunders in history. From drunken Austrians to overconfident Brits, from invading Russians to ill-prepared Americans, we've covered the spectrum of military incompetence. We've learned that underestimating your opponent, poor planning, And a healthy dose of arrogance can be a recipe for disaster, even for the most powerful of armies. We've also seen how courage, determination, and a little bit of luck can sometimes turn the tide of battle even against seemingly insurmountable odds. So, the next time you're feeling smug about your knowledge of history, just remember these tales of military woe. They serve as a reminder that even the best-laid plans can go awry, and that sometimes the difference between victory and defeat is a thin line indeed. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more fascinating historical content. See you next time.